Shoshoni Andrew, Ojibwe and Secwepemc, born in Manitoba and raised within the Secwepemc territory on the Adams Lake, with the Adams Lake Indian Band, and Dylan Daniels from the Eagle Clan and House of Scutyun in Gitwangak. So thank you, the three of you, for joining us. I'm also pleased to introduce Howard Grant, the Executive Director with the First Nations Summit Society and also Council member for the Musqueam Indian Band First Nation. So thank you so much for joining us, Howard. Always lovely to see you. And I also want to introduce Amy Adrian, who is going to be our moderator a little bit later in today's session. He is also working with the First Nations Public Service Secretariat. I would like to recognize that the Reverse Town Hall today is part of a unique and important initiative and memorandum of understanding signed between the First Nations Public Service Secretariat, the First Nations Summit, and the BC Federal Council. The objective of the Reverse Town Halls are to create an opportunity for First Nations to share their voice and stories with federal public servants in BC. And I would also like to acknowledge the support from both the Western Economic Diversification, who will be completing a French translation of this event that will be available on April 6th, and the Public Services and Procurement of Canada for supporting the ASL translation that we'll have here today. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to, I believe, Amory, or no, wait, sorry, I'm not the best moderator this morning. I haven't done it in a while.
Over to Howard for opening comments.
Yeah, so over to Howard Grant. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Selena, and welcome to all of you. And I just want to say thank you to our youth or our younger panelists. They're youth to me, but they're my younger panelist colleagues on this Reverse Town Hall. I'm coming to you from the unceded traditional territory of the Musqueam Indian Band, and I'm pleased to welcome each and every one of you today, and taking the time out of your lunch hour to hear and listen to our journey in this wonderful world that we live in. So a little bit about me. I'm Howard Grant. My traditional name is Kayapalanuk. I am the great-great-grandson of Kayapalanuk, the man who met Captain Narvaez in 1791 and Captain Vancouver in 1792. I am the direct descendant, and therefore I was given the privilege of being bestowed the name Kayapalanuk. And it's an honor to have that name, that I have the responsibility of that. So as well, too, just to let you know that I'm an elderly gentleman, that I've experienced life in many career opportunities, be it a longshoreman, a fisherman, and a civil servant, and a behind-the-scenes politician. You know, I hate the limelight, but I do a lot of public speaking. So I just wanted to, I'll give you a very quick snapshot of where I'm from and my path that led to me to be here today with you. You know, born and raised in the Musqueam community, I had a rugged life because of the Indian Act, that my father was non-Aboriginal. Therefore, I was a child that was born of an unwed parents. I should have been status to begin with, but sad to say, the Indian agent of the day thought he was God and removed I and my siblings. So we remained not citizens of either country, Canada or our First Nation. It was a huge challenge, and I got to learn and understand the machinery of government from the Indian Affairs bureaucracy level, and grew up hating it, you know, the Indian Act more so. I think we all did as Aboriginal people. But moving on, I entered the career of a backroom boy in the political arena. And I started to realize that our First Nations leaders of the day in the 1960s, 70s, were always speaking about a relationship that would be ongoing forever between the Crown and First Nation, and that relationship would be there forever. And that one day we would once again have and govern ourselves and have a government to government relationship. Seeing that, I knew then that in order for us to have that we needed to understand the machinery of government, federal and provincial. So I embarked upon a career. I took the opportunity, I applied at a senior management level. I was very blessed and fortunate to have the opportunity to be in the senior management category. I was a senior bureaucrat for 10 years within the government, and I was given the opportunity to participate as a director of a district operation for a period of time. So I was that Indian agent that I hated. And then I was also the associate director of operations for the BC region as well. And then I also was seconded to Ottawa on a number of occasions to assist in developing policy that was developed for the new relations that were beginning to be provided to First Nations and the interpretation of the Indian Act, etc. So I want to say at this particular time that my mother believed in education. And I and my elders, because I was blessed and fortunate to be talking to people that were born in the 1860s and 70s and 80s, you know, that grounded me in knowing who I was, who I came from, what I belonged to, and what I stood for. That gave me the confidence of going to public school, being one of only a few brown-skinned people in a upper middle class area of Vancouver. And was I intimidated? No, because I was so confident in knowing who I was. You know, being poor, but in a social class that was in the elite category, but I didn't suffer any kind of inferiority complex. But having said all of that, I embraced joining the public service, knowing full well that I could never change policy. But my role and my responsibility was to be able to read policy and interpret it and deliver it in the least negative impact possible to our constituents. And then one day, returning home to my community, and then being able to help develop our governance structure, our traditional governance structure, so, and to then become a government to government relationship that hopefully will one day be fulfilled. And lo and behold, you are in a very good position now today as young Aboriginal people with the DRIPA and the potentially UNDRIP legislation going to occur that will embrace reconciliation and a new relationship. But in order to fulfill all of that, we need to fully comprehend the machinery of government. You know, it's like going to a card table. If you don't know the rules of the game, then you're not going to win. You know, you need to have that knowledge right up front. So that was my path in a Cole's Notes version. But I also have encouraged, as my mother did, to have all of our people get an education and to go to post-secondary and get a degree in public admin or economics or whatever. But in doing so, it presented a secondary challenge. And that secondary challenge I call the dinner table talk education. You know, we sent all of our children to university. We hated the residential school syndrome that affected all of us. But what we were remiss in trying to do was to replace that dinner table talk to know who you are, who you come from, what your environment is, and how to preserve it. What was important to your old people that should be important to you? You know, that one grove of timber, you know, may look like $1 million if you cut it down, but it might have some spiritual or other form of significance. And the only way you can learn that is from being educated by your elders and your conversation with your people. And that's the missing element that I see today in a lot of our when I say youth, I'm talking about post-secondary people, is that you don't have that opportunity that I had, talking every day, or listening, not talking, listening and hearing what our old people were saying. And now I'm blessed and fortunate in my community that we are now dispelling the colonial European concept of Westminster model of governance and Musqueamizing our governance structure. We're moving towards a more traditional approach of our governance that many of us have had the opportunity to learn from our old people. And that's the saving grace for all of us as Indigenous people and Indigenous nations. And then I look at the other side of the coin. You, the youth of Aboriginal communities, working within the bureaucracy. How can you gain the support of your colleagues, your peers, your supervisors, your deputy ministers? I was blessed and fortunate that when I took and I joined the federal government, that everyone came around me and supported me. You know, every district manager, every senior manager, the director, and in particular, the director of finance, you know, helping me, teaching me, mentoring me, you know, and not that I wasn't not having the knowledge, but again, learning more and more about the bureaucracy, its machinery and its processes. So I look to those who are here today listening that are bureaucrats, that you have a responsibility, because it's not that you're ever going to lose a job. It's going to be educating, mentoring, and supporting your colleague who hopefully one day will return home to their community and sit not across the table, but around the table with you, improving your local community, improving your local municipality, improving your provincial government and nationally.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. Sorry, Howard. Thank you so much for that. I just, sorry to interrupt, but we will have Howard Grant back for some closing comments. You are such a wealth of information, and I could listen to you all day, and I think the 400 people who are listening could also do the same. So we will have you back at the end of the webinar. So I'd like to go ahead and hand it over to Amory, who has some specific questions that he's going to pose to our youth panelists here today. And then we will open it up for questions for the whole group to ask some questions, and you will be using that Q&A dialog box. There's a button at the bottom of your screen. There's a toolbar there with a Q&A button. So if you have questions that come to mind as we're going through these initial questions, please feel free to put them, and then we'll try to get to all of them as soon as we can. So over to you, Amory.
Yes, thank you, Selena, and thank you, Howard, for your opening comments. Good morning, everybody. My traditional name is Shuish. My given name is Amory Adrian. I come from the community of Chalath, which is in the Statliam Nation in the interior of BC. And I also have family connections to Ihatasats on Vancouver Island through my grandmother. I'm here today in my home office in Fort Langley, British Columbia, which is the traditional territory of the Kwantlen people. And I'll be kind of moderating the Q&A with the three panelists here today. So my first question is going to be open to all three panelists, and just ask that we respond in order. We'll go with Karista, Shoshoni, and then Dylan. Can you please tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what made you choose your current career path?
Great, thanks, Amory. So my name is Karista Olson. I am originally from the Gitxsan community of Sigadak, also known as Glendowell in the Hazeltons. I am currently the policy analyst for the Innovation, Bioeconomy, and Indigenous Opportunities branch of the Ministry of Forests. So I have had the great pleasure of living and working on the traditional territories of the Musqueam-speaking peoples of the Songhees, Musqueam, Mountain Western First Nations here in Greater Victoria. And I would say that I chose my current path after really taking a good, long, hard look at some of the challenges that I was seeing in our communities in terms of how complex and multi-sectoral they were, pardon me. So I think that in recognizing that, I really set out to pursue diverse and intersectional training, both academic and experiential, in the hope that when the time came, I would be able to return to my community and to be able to support and advance solutions to some of these issues in ways that acknowledged how complex the challenges were, and to support the work already being advanced by my nation and by our community members is kind of how I ended up on the path that I'm currently on. And I was very, very fortunate to have been placed by the Indigenous Internship Program with my team that facilitates work in a manner that is just as diverse and just as cognizant of how many different areas I think that we need to consider when approaching issues, not just of economics, of governance, of community building, of relationship building, of all of these, of all of those areas. So yeah, that's how I ended up here.
Awesome. Thank you, Karista.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming today. My name is Shoshoni Andrew. My traditional Ojibwe name is Ugimau Bindige. I am originally from Adams Lake Indian Band within the Secwepemc Nation in the interior of BC. I am currently working as an assistant negotiator for treaties and Aboriginal government within the Ministry of Crown Indigenous Relations, Northern Affairs Canada. My apologies for the long acronyms. My reason for choosing my current path was originally rooted in an intergenerational trauma-based response of wanting to both escape from my reserve as well as the life that came with living on a reserve. However, upon meeting my cohort with the Indigenous Youth Internship Program, that unhealthy trauma-based reasoning became this healthy motivation of wanting to gain experience within government so I can one day return to my community and help my people, just like Howard Grad stated prior. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Shoshoni. And over to you, Dylan.
Good morning, everybody. My traditional name is Gulakam Zimilich, and I'm from the House of Skyan in Gitwanga, which is, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Dylan, it's a little hard to hear. Are you able to speak up just a touch?
I'll try. Can you hear me any better? Amory, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. It is a bit low, but I might suggest that the attendees, you can turn up your volume if possible. We are living in a pandemic situation, so sometimes the masks are required. So I hope that everybody can appreciate the fact that he has to leave it on right now at this point in time. So.
Hello, can you hear me fine, Selena?
Yes.
Okay, I took my my earphones off, so I'm just going right off the thing here. So if I may start over again.
Sure.
My name is Gulakam Zimilich, which is my traditional name. I'm here in Gitwanga, which is a reserve on the Skeena River, and my mother is of Niska, and my father is a Gitnyao hereditary chief. So this is where I've grown up. I currently work for the Gitwanga Health Authority as a community liaison, and I'm a construction safety officer and a first aid officer by trade. I'm a member of the Eagle Clan, the House of Skyan, the community in Turk, which I grew up on, hunting, fishing, gathering traditional medicines, taking part in traditional governance conducted in a feast hall. Over the years, I've sat at the negotiation table with my hereditary chief, and that's when meeting with provincial and federal government over various issues and discussions related to the management and protection of our traditional territories. And as a youth in my younger years, I successfully completed programs offered to First Nations youth to become a successful and build experience level to allow them to succeed in an urban setting and the traditional world that we live in today. So I've always wanted to work for my people, and I truly believe that it started when I was young. Asking my father about what he does as a hereditary chief and as a negotiator for the Gitnyao Nation, that really sparked this keen interest that really wanted me to be able to represent our people at a higher level. Just seeing that happen and having the voice that represents what your nation's and your people's values are. So that really is how it started for me. The career path that I chose initially was something different that I ended up with in the end. I started out wanting to go to school to be a marine biologist and things like that, but then life kind of changes, and growing up on the reserve, moving to the city, living there for a while, building an experience base, and wanting to bring that experience and knowledge back to my community is really what I've done so far. And that kind of brings me back to what I'm doing now, working as a community health liaison during this COVID time, and just helping to support my community. So that's where I am right now. And I think that's where I'll leave this beginning part so far.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Dylan. My next question that I have is going to be directed to both Shoshoni and Karista. Would either of you consider returning to your home community to live and work? And I'll start with a response from Shoshoni, please.
Thank you, Amory. As stated in question 1, I hope that one day I can return to my community and to work and live with my people. At this point in my career and personal healing from intergenerational trauma, I am not quite yet ready to return to Adams Lake Indian Band to live or to work. I also feel as though my community is not quite yet ready for me. However, I am hopeful that in time, my career development and healing will intersect with my community's development and healing, thus allowing me the opportunity to take my experience and give it back to my people. When that time comes, I would love to work for my people. Until then, I will continue on my path of career development and making peace with my intergenerational trauma. Thank you.
Thank you, Shoshoni.
I would love the opportunity to move home and to have that that connectivity with my community again. I think that when you're raised in community and taught to think as part of a nation, public service takes on a bit of a different meaning. So I always appreciate the opportunity to get to hear from people like Howard Grant, who have been involved in building opportunities for people like us to be able to do this kind of work is so impactful. The goal for me was always to circle back around and return to my community. And being on the seasoned end of youth these days, I think that that opportunity is something that I'll be looking for in the very near future. The question was always a matter of timing. I knew that to leave community to find the opportunities that I needed was going to be a huge sacrifice. I just don't think I truly realized how big a sacrifice that would be. And in looking at going back, I think that when the right opportunity presents itself, I'll be more than happy to take advantage of that. But as it stands, my ability to continue to work within the BC Public Service specifically is going to be limited insofar as I have to be away from my community to continue that work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Karista. My next question is for Dylan. Dylan, you spent 10 years in Vancouver before returning home to work in your community. When did you decide to make that return back home? And can you give us kind of a brief explanation as to why?
Like Amory said, I did go to Vancouver. This was right out of high school, and I wanted to really find and build an experience. So after living in Vancouver, I decided it was time to make the move back home. I had a great experience navigating the urban life, and was lucky to have the supports that I had to make it successfully. I decided to move back home because I missed really being out on the land and out on the water, you know, fishing, hunting, gathering medicines, all the things that I was accustomed to growing up, you know. That's also being away for so long. It kept me from being involved with my culture. And the culture that's mine, and, you know, and it's taken place on the territory as well. So I feel that all of the experience involved with the great programs like Blade Runners and Access that I took part of while I was in Vancouver, being involved with various youth centers, and the programs that they offered, you know, allowed me to build an experience and knowledge base that I could use to better my people and help the young people make it in an urban setting. Because it wasn't always easy for me. At times I did struggle when I made the move there. And like I mentioned, I was very fortunate to have the supports and the programs that were available when I first moved to Vancouver. When I took part in this program called Blade Runners. They do life skills training. They offer, and it's for First Nations youth. They provide them with the resources, life skills, job coaching. This program run by a team that understands the boundaries that First Nations face, whether you're coming from the reserve or you grew up in the urban setting, or maybe you even grew up in the system. And they understand all of that, and they're able to support me. And I know that they're able to support a lot of other youth over the years while I've been involved with them. And they give this kind of almost like a sense of family, and, you know, they're always there for you 24/7. They have a slogan that, you know, once you're a Blade Runner, you're always a Blade Runner. And you know, why did I decide to come home? There was one day I was on a job site, and I was working construction, and I was using this torch to, you know, to put this waterproof membrane on, and accidentally caught some wood on fire. And the smell of that smoke really brought me home, and it made me miss being home on the territory, being with my people. And I've always had that urge to be out on the land and to be where, you know, I grew up. So that's really why I came home, and I wanted to share my experience with the people back here so that I could help youth that maybe wanting to make that move, or maybe are looking to find the right path that they want to go down.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much for sharing, Dylan. So I have one more question that I wanted to ask, and it's going to be directed to all three panelists again. But again, I'm going to ask Karista and Shoshoni, what can the public service do better to support Indigenous youth who have chosen to be public servants, living in urban centers while being away from community and culture? And I'll ask Karista maybe if she could jump in first.
If we had a full hour for me to just answer this question, it still might not be enough time. But that said, I think this is really kind of two distinct conversations. When we're talking about what can be done by the public service as a collective of citizens who are learning and growing and training and trying to go about their work the best way that they can, is one very distinct conversation, but then also looking at the public service as a structure or as a series of structures. First, hire more of us, full stop. I think the embodied impact of having more young Indigenous professionals in the public service is going to be considerably more impactful, more fulsome, more productive than any resources we could develop, any training we could roll out. Are those things important? Absolutely. But there's going to be a much richer approach to the work, a much richer and much more diverse culture within the public service if there's actual representation. And secondly, I think that there needs to be considerable work done on and around understanding the very legitimate reasons why young Indigenous professionals are not inherently drawn to these types of roles or to work in these types of arenas, and why we don't stay too long once we're here. I made very clear to my team, for whom I am very grateful. I have a wonderful group of people that I work with, and we do incredible work in itself, but I knew that my time in the public service was going to be limited because my goal was to return home. So being cognizant of building programs and building work environments that are attractive to young Indigenous professionals by doing things differently would be the two primary areas I think that I would identify.
Awesome. Thank you, Karista. And over to Shoshoni.
Thank you both so much. To echo Karista's early statement, there's not enough time to provide thorough advice on how the public service can do better to support Indigenous youth who are public servants. So instead, I would like to tell a story that I hold close to me, and I genuinely hope that if you are a white public servant, that you take this story to heart that I'm about to share with you. As a bit of background, within my email signature, I have my traditional Ojibwe name next to my English name. I end my emails by saying thank you in Secwepemc or Ojibwe. And in the land acknowledgement section, I have, as a proud member of the Secwepemc and Ojibwe people, ... And on a very stressful day, I received an email from a colleague within Transport Canada. I opened the email and I saw at the very end, he said, thank you in Secwepemc, which shocked me and brought me to tears in all honesty, because there's this man, a white man who I never met in person and who I had very little interaction with at the time. He took the time to say thank you in my language. And to this day, he still says thank you and hello in Ojibwe or Secwepemc. He asked me the meaning behind my Ojibwe traditional name, which no one has done as of yet. And this man went above and beyond to acknowledge my Indigenous identity instead of seeing me as a check in the box public servant. To me, reconciliation is not just a checklist task for external work. All it takes is one moment of kindness and empathy to say hello or thank you in your Indigenous colleague's language. One quick moment to educate yourself and make someone's day the way my transport colleague constantly makes mine. So Miigwech, Cooksjam, thank you to him, and thank you everybody.
It's very powerful. Thank you for sharing that story, Shoshoni. And last but not least, Dylan, I have one more last question for you as well. And now that you've made that transition to move back home and work for your nation's administration, what do you think the public service could do to support Indigenous youth who are choosing to return home and work at the nation level?
Okay. You know, it's a tough question for me to answer, because I personally, haven't really faced any difficulty coming back to my community and getting involved. with I guess you could call the administration here that I work with. But I think what they need to, what public service would need to do is to listen to our leaders and who are saying, the newer generation is promoting, like a sustainable life and an inclusive one that will benefit our people for generations to come. What we've gone through as a people has taught us that we need to stick together, and that the path isn't always what it usually how you set it out to be. And using a perfect example is the COVID pandemic that we're in right now. It's really had our people come together. Our people and the world has seen that our people are vulnerable due to our unique living situations, the barriers that we face on multiple levels. So I say to continue to support the youth in preparing for a world that's very difficult. It's a difficult political world to manage. While keeping a balance of the home life that includes staying connected with the land, the knowledge, and the culture through keeping connected to the leaders in the community and elders. So to better help a youth to return home, I think would be to keep them connected while they're away from home. Because sometimes that link is missing. I know, for example, from where I'm from, going down to Vancouver, they have places like the Tzamek Society, which is the Niska, kind of like, it would be like a consulate there that all their people can go to stay connected back home. I didn't have one from my nation, from my people. All I really had was a friendship center that was there that helped me to continue to stay grounded and stay connected to home, so that if I ever needed to come back home, would the transition be easy? Maybe not, if I've always lived away from home trying to come home, but because I already grew up here, I was aware of what it was like to live here, the kind of the administration and how it works here. So just keeping a connection to culture and keeping a connection to home while you're away also would make that transition a little easier.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Dylan. And I just wanted to raise my hands to all three of you and thank you for your time, for coming out today and being a part of this reverse town hall. And I think we'll open up the floor now to questions and answers. I think Selena has been kind of monitoring that Q&A chat box in the background. So I don't know if you wanted to ask some questions to the panel here, Selena, and we'll see if what kind of happens here in the next 10 minutes for this Q&A.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Amory, so much, and for the youth for sharing your perspectives on those questions. Always a pleasure to hear from youth. Provides a very different perspective. I feel like I've aged out of that youth age gap, but so thanks so much for sharing that, for sure. We have about 3 questions. I'm encouraging lots of questions for all the federal public servants on this call. This is your space to ask whatever pops into your brain right now, just after listening to what they have to say, to hopefully get some answers from them directly. I'm going to leave it up to the youth I'm going to ask the question, and if you feel like you want to answer it, anyone to jump in and do that. I'm not going to call on you specifically and tell you to do that. So I'm just going to start with the first one. And I do want to mention you can upvote questions. So actually the first one has actually been upvoted 3 times. So if you see a question that you really like, go ahead and upvote it to get it boosted to the top. The first question is, COVID-19 has shown us that location does not limit ability or success in employment. How can the government improve their nation-to-nation collaboration by decentralizing positions in Ottawa? Oops, it just got bumped down. By hiring directly in each nation, understanding that housing in communities is limited. So to any one of our panelists, go ahead and unmute and go ahead and answer.
I guess I'll take a first crack at this one. So I'm the questions are bouncing around pretty quickly. How can the government improve their nation-to-nation collaboration by decentralizing positions in Ottawa by hiring directly in each nation? I think that is in itself the answer there. I mean, decentralizing these positions and providing a robust framework that is developed collaboratively with not just Indigenous public servants, but with those same governments, and looking at, okay, what considerations do we need to have in place for this framework being developed? I think that the BCPSA is in the process of developing more policies to support robust telework agreements. What that's going to look like, I don't know. How that's going to apply to my personal context, I don't know yet. But I think that, I mean, we've seen during COVID that these types of alternative arrangements can be put into place, can be very productive. I think that what I would love to see is for that momentum to continue. If I could continue to work for the BC Public Service from my community and know that I wasn't missing out on opportunities because of my location, that I wasn't being looked over for things because I wasn't immediately available for whatever reason, having that type of support, having teams that are supportive of that work, and shifting away from this conceptualization that Indigenous employees are being given provision X, Y, and Z because, and why don't I? I mean, I think that is still such a prevalent issue within the public service, and maybe that's not specific to this arena, but I've experienced it. I think probably most of your Indigenous colleagues have experienced it. And if you want to get details on what that looks like, ask them.
Thank you so much, Karista. We're going to move on to the next question in the interest of time, and because it's been upvoted 11 times. The next question is, government is unfortunately a colonial system wherein discrimination, both intentional and non, and oppression are still sadly very present. How can we create more cultural and emotional safety within this system to encourage more Indigenous youth interns to stay within the government? And Shoshoni?
Okay, hi, I would like to take a stab at this question. The answer I would like to give, to me, seems simple, but to a non-Indigenous public servant, it may not be as simple. My advice that I give you is learn how to be uncomfortable with feeling uncomfortable, and recognizing and creating a space to be open with being uncomfortable. For example, I wouldn't really call it a disagreement, but a cultural misunderstanding with a fellow member of my team that resulted in my feeling very discouraged and hurt. And my director took the initiative to step in and have the employee and I talk it out, and her and I did. And we recognized that for me to come forward and say, hi, what you said hurt my feelings as an Indigenous employee, here's why. And for her to say, okay, I recognize what I did was wrong, and moving forward, I will try my best not to do it. So it's just the matter of learning how, again, to reiterate, to feel comfortable with being uncomfortable and opening yourself up and creating the space for those discussions. Thank you.
Thanks so much. Sorry, we're going to go ahead. Oh, lots of other questions being upvoted and moved around. Dylan, please feel free to jump in and unmute at any time if you also want to add on to any of the other questions. The next question is, do the panelists who work in government feel that their Indigenous identity is celebrated and their unique experiences are valued, or are they expected to neutralize their identities and blend into bureaucracy?
I would say that I have never felt racialized in my role, which is not something that I expected, but something I've been very appreciative of. My team, and I think my experience in general, is not standard for a lot of either young Indigenous employees or for people who have come through the IEP program. I got really lucky, and I realized that I got really lucky. they have held space for my experience without being prescriptive to what I needed to perform as an Indigenous employee. And I think that's a very difficult line to balance, especially if you don't come to a relationship like this with a lot of cultural competencies or cultural agility or experience at the community level, which my team has. So I am eternally grateful to them, and they are very much one of the reasons I stayed in the public service. So I won't say celebrated, because that in itself, I think can be operationally rather performative, valued absolutely. But I think that they were very cognizant of expressing that appreciation for me and my experiences and my skills versus what I bring to the table through that Indigenous lens.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Dylan. I see you unmuted.
From where I work right now, I work on the reserve, and I work it's through the First Nations Health Authority, so it's the Gitwanguk Health Authority. And the other side of the building is the band administration. So it's a building full of our people from our nation working for our people, for our nation, right? So our identity is very celebrated. We do make decisions based on the knowledge of our community and the best interests of our people. So I mean, we do always come back to our identity to make these answers so that they do fit for the nation as a whole, you know? And I've never felt that I've had to really neutralize my identity dealing with any kind of bureaucracy. I really do find that from other examples, sitting at a negotiation table with the province or the federal government, they are really wanting to learn more from us and who we are as a people. So they've never tried to suppress it or and in a modern day, they really want us to be able to express who we are and why we hold those values so that they can better understand us. And I would encourage people who are listening in to continue to find who are you talking to? What are their values? And you know, where do they want to go in the future? And what is that? How are they going to prosper from that kind of thing? So, you know, getting to know who the people are that you're talking to and the values that they hold.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dylan. We have 17 open questions and probably 5 minutes left. So I have to say thank you, all of you, for your questions and wanting to engage. Maybe while Howard is doing some closing comments, some of our youth are willing to type in their responses. If there's anything you'd like to respond to, you can still see those publicly until the webinar ends. Any last comments, though, from all three of you, if you'd like to say anything before we invite Howard to provide some closing comments this webinar?
Yeah, maybe just to wrap things up. As I just stated in the chat box, I am always happy to make myself available for discussions, for chats, for any way that I can support. So please don't hesitate to reach out. It's email, just my name, karista.olson@bcgov.bc.ca. But I really want to acknowledge everybody who's taken the time today to join us and to be a part of this conversation and to encourage the continuation of this type of dialogue. It is hugely important. And I really acknowledge the team that helped bring this opportunity to us, and just want to express my appreciation. And that's it for me.
Thanks. Shoshoni, any final comments?
Yes, to echo what Karista previously stated, I would happily make myself available for coffee chats, to answer questions, or to just meet and kind of create that space of open dialogue so we can have these discussions that I feel are very needed as someone who has worked in the federal government for about 2 years now. So I would be happy to volunteer myself to do that as well. Thank you everyone for making the time out of your day to listen to all of the presenters and the panelists. And I think that's great. So thank you.
Thanks so much. And Dylan, any final comments from you? You're on mute.
Thank you. I too would like to thank the fellow panelists, organizers, Shoshoni for sharing your story, Karista from sharing your experience and your story as well. Thank you for being here as a youth. It's not easy to speak up and to bring your experience to a table, and to, you know, I think it's very important that we do share our knowledge and experience and maybe what is mostly needed, what's kind of missing in the big picture. And also would like to thank the organizers for putting this together, taking the time, and those who have attended to ask questions and are here because it shows that you really do care. You're here to actually learn. You're here to hear our voice, and it shows that you're interested in, you know, creating a better relationship, helping us to you know, build capacity where it's needed. So I would like to thank you all. Doik Seatnism. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, all three of you, for taking the time to share your experiences with us. Much appreciated. And Amory for moderating the questions earlier. I'd like to hand it back over to Howard Grant for some closing comments. And then you will be prompted for a survey at the end of this too, once we close the webinar. So you can continue to leave more questions and feedback on this session too as well. Over to you, Howard.
Thank you, Selena. And thank you to all of those who are participated in this reverse town hall this afternoon. And I really want to say a real thank you to our panelists that you emotionally touched me very deeply. That you know, your words and your responses to the questions and your feelings in regards to who you are and returning home and working with people, that is something that I've strived to hear for years, and I'm happy for that. To the bureaucrats that are on the line, again, the first question always is, do you know your client or the constituents that you serve? That's most important, and that to realize that, you know, we in British Columbia, for sure, if not all First Nations across Canada, still embrace the extended family concept, whereas the European and the colonial and the new migrants have adopted a nuclear life, and it clashes with each other because there's a misunderstanding and whatnot of that, you know. And also as bureaucrats to recognize that once you train these people and mentor them and want them to return home, and that our authorities differ dramatically from yours, that you have, if you're a federal civil servant, you are obligated to the federal government, and the provincial, you are legally responsible to the provincial crown. Whereas when we deal with our issues, we deal at a local level, i.e. to our own constituents, but we also have to be mindful of the federal government's jurisdiction, their laws, their policies. We also have to be cognizant of the provincial crown's laws and their policies and their jurisdiction, and then mindful and observant of the regional district and the adjacent municipalities. So our role is probably tenfold once we come back home. And then we also have to manage the Crown Corporation kind of concept within our communities. And last but not least, we then have to also deal with businesses as we grow in order to ensure that our governance structure is stable and is consistent. So those kinds of things is that when government transfers their delegated responsibilities to First Nations, Indian Affairs started that first with the federal government, i.e. delegating, but only at a CR3 level. And whereas now they're asking for reports and business to deal at a PM5, PM6 level. And likewise, within the provincial government, it's very similar. They're asking First Nations on a nation-to-nation basis to negotiate across the table various agreements and whatnot, but not providing them the resources to do that. So as a takeaway for you, to ask you, to encourage you to elevate the IEP program to a higher standard, and you, the federal civil servants, to say to your regional director generals to go to the IIIC table and encourage them to adopt a similar role as the IEP, so that this program can expand itself to encourage that First Nations coming into the public service, federal and provincial. And in closing, I want to say thank you to Selena and to Amory for co-hosting this and doing a wonderful job. And hopefully we've imparted something of value to you, the listeners. I hope you heard what our panelists were talking about. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Howard. And again, to all of our panelists today and Amory for making this such a great, successful session. And thank you, all of you. I see a lot of people logging off. It's your lunch hour. We will be doing another reverse town hall, and then you will be getting a survey for this event via email, I believe. So please fill that out. It helps us plan for future reverse town halls. And also just get involved in some way, shape, or form. Reach out to the heads of your departments and see which ways that you can get involved with FNPSS, or ensuring that youth are, involved and incorporated in a more meaningful way on the federal side. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful afternoon and a great week. Bye-bye.